thank you everyone for joining our Lunch and Learn today on conflict resolution. And we have two wonderful grad students who work for Claire Canfield and have agreed to help give us 3 tips to help resolve conflict in an easier way than we may have experienced. So we're excited to learn from them today. The first individual is Diana Costanzo. Now I'm going to say it wrong again. Sorry, Costanzo, right?
Yes.
I apologize. Diana
No worries.
Costanzo. She's a grad student here at Utah State University studying communication. She received her bachelor's degree in relational communications and nonprofit management from Boise State University. She is passionate about working with others to improve their relationships and is fascinated by nonprofit organizations. Her life goal is to start a nonprofit organization that works to prevent domestic abuse and that teaches healthy relationship skills. In her free time, she likes to read and hang out with her dog. So welcome, Diana.
Thank you.
Lindsay Bennett is the other grad student who's going to be talking to us today, and she graduated from USU with a bachelor's degree in global communications, concentrating on peace-building communication and relationships. She is in her 2nd year as a grad student here at USU in the Communication Studies program, where she is focusing on interpersonal and compassionate communication. Her master's project is geared towards helping individuals who support a loved one who lives with mental illness. The key is through compassionate support. When she isn't studying, you'll find her snuggling her dog, listening to a podcast, relaxing in a hammock, or all of the above. Thank you, Lindsay. I'll turn the time over to you guys and let you start. Thank you.
All right, welcome everyone. I'm just gonna share my screen real quick with y'all. I'm super excited to be here, and I know Lindsay is too. Thanks for giving us an hour of your day to come chat about conflict management. It's a super interesting and fun topic that I love learning about, and I love talking about and helping people through, and I know Lindsay could say the same. So today we're going to talk about just a 3-step process for moving from stressful conflict to connection with others. And conflict, for most of us, we probably think of it as kind of scary, or we might hate it or dread it, or worry about it, or might stress us out. And that's a normal response, but it doesn't necessarily have to be the way we respond to conflict. And that's going to be what we talk about today. Conflicts can be used to facilitate closer connection and better relationships and getting our needs met and other people's needs met, both within work or our families, or any other type of conflict you might experience with other people. These skills transfer across all sorts of relationships. So I'm going to define conflict for you. This is one definition. And if you have any ideas on what conflict is to you, feel free to put them in the chat if you want to add to this. But conflict is a struggle between 2 or more people. So in this interpersonal context, we have to have at least 2 people in the conflict, if not more. And then there are perceived incompatible goals. So often in conflict, we see that our needs and someone else's needs or goals are different, and that there's nothing that we can do about it, and they're just separate, and one of us wins and one of us loses a lot of the time. But it doesn't have to be that way, and that's what we're going to be talking about today. So we perceive this incompatible goals when that's not necessarily the truth, or we perceive goal interference. So we perceive that the other person is getting in the way of us meeting our needs or accomplishing our goals. And that also may not always be the case. And sometimes both of those things just need to be solved through conversation and discussing needs from both sides. And then they can be realized and figured out and solved. So we're going to be talking about a 3-step process of asking questions, listening to others, and expressing our own needs. And Lindsay is going to start by talking about asking questions.
Yeah. So, and also just really quick about the chat, we are going to be using the chat feature to ask questions and get your feedback and some discussion going. So you might need to hit your escape button on your computer keyboard so that you can then see the chat. That's what I had to do for mine. I can still see the screen that's being shared. So if you guys would hit the escape button, that will help us with the chat feature. So, okay. So yes, we are going to talk about that 3-step process. And this is step 1, is asking open, honest questions. So one of my first questions for you, and then we're going to talk more about this, is what is conflict like for you? So how do you view conflict first? Oh, we might have just lost Diana. Okay, well, while we're figuring that out, what is conflict like for you? So if I've got in the chat, conflict is like, okay, so something to be avoided. What else would you say? So for me, I use it as a metaphor. Yeah, scary, uncomfortable, unresolved difference of opinion, stressful. Yeah. Well, okay, so Sarah says an opportunity to come together and rebuild relationships. Yeah, that's a great way to look at it too, because it is true. So one thing that I like to do to figure out where I sit and how I visualize conflict is with a metaphor. So for example, when I very first was taking Claire's conflict class in my undergrad, he asks us this question, and my first thought was, conflict is like, my metaphor is trying to tame an aggressive lion. So, and then there were other people in the class where they were like trying to blend up pieces of metal. Okay, so Diana is getting back. So if you had to think of a metaphor to describe what conflict is like for you, what would that be? Go ahead and put it in the chat. So again, mine was conflict is like trying to tame an aggressive lion. Another one was conflict is like trying to blend pieces of metal in a blender. I think I might be frozen. Am I frozen? Will you guys in the chat say if I'm frozen? No. Okay. Sarah says I'm not frozen. Okay. So conflict is like crunching rocks, trying to row a canoe upstream, trying to do a puzzle but missing pieces. What else would you say? Go ahead and keep typing it in the chat. Falling in a big black hole, passing through a wall of fire, trying to clean outside windows on a windy day, balancing 2 plates on sticks. This is excellent. So you can kind of start to see how stressful conflict can be, how hectic maybe conflict could be. Passing through a wall of fire, that feels dangerous, you know, so falling in a big black hole sounds like it could be really harmful. Trying to do a puzzle but missing pieces, that might feel like it's never going to get resolved. And conflict is like a retreating back into a snail shell. Yeah, where you're like, ooh, I'm gonna completely avoid that altogether and hide from it, where no one else can get in there and no one else can have that type of conversation with me. Yeah, so this helps us really start to figure out where our minds are with conflict. So let me just see, Diana, in the chat, will you say if you're able to share your screen again? You are sharing your screen.
No, you can't.
Oh, okay, there we go. Okay, perfect. Thank you. Okay, so now that we kind of know where we sit with our metaphor, you can start to think about what that's like for you and how that tells how you maybe approach conflict. Well, these 3 steps are going to help us move from where that might be stressful, where we might see conflict as stressful, like a lot of your metaphors and a lot of your responses earlier did, and then how we can move to something that is actually going to bring us more connection with people. And that can include our coworkers as well. So the first step is to ask open, honest questions. So I wanted to find out what you think, we can go to our next slide, what an open question is. And will you go ahead and put that in the chat? What's an open question? Yeah, that's excellent. All of those are really good. So open questions are not just yes or no, like that's pretty standard. But it's leaving opportunities for options. So when you ask a question, yeah, it's not a leading question. It's not advice in the form of a question. It's open so that the other person can really explore their options to be able to respond. And that's where you can really start to get that connection, because then there's no leading, there's no blame going on, stuff like that. So yeah. And let's see, what else did you say? Yeah, you're giving some examples. Excellent. Yeah, it leaves room for explanation, like Susan said. Yeah, excellent. So those are what open questions are. And this really starts to set the stage for that ability to connect, rather than to like have some defensiveness up already. And this is going to be creating a space so that both of you can ask questions of each other. You can both listen and you can both express what you need and what your thoughts are, perhaps. Okay, we can go on to the next question. Okay, so the second part of asking open, honest questions are honest questions. So just taking a stab at it, what do you think honest questions might be? Go ahead and put that in the chat. What do you think an honest question is? Yeah, ones you really want an answer to, and we'll listen to the response of the other person, actually interested in the answer. We have some examples there. Not a leading response you expect to get. Yeah, no agenda. Yeah, one without reservations. Excellent. You can keep adding your ideas there. That's great. So yeah, honest questions are questions that you can't possibly know the answer to. So it's like, I'm going to give you some back pocket questions in a little bit that you can take a screenshot of or write down, some that you might that might resonate with you. But honest questions are, like I said, ones that you can't possibly know the answer to. Like you might have an idea if someone is upset at work, you might sense that they're upset, but you might not know what exactly they're upset about or what kind of emotion upset encompasses. You might not know. And so it's asking these questions that are open and honest so that you can give them opportunities to explore the answer, and you're not leading with an agenda. Like it's just open space so that they can explore what they're really thinking or what they really want to say, or what is really on their mind. And that's something that you can't possibly know because you're not in their shoes. Like I said, you might have an idea, but you won't really know until you ask. And honest questions are sincere as well. Like someone else mentioned too, that it's not leading them to anything. I want to see what else you said. Not mincing words. Yep. And you're listening to their response. Like you are trying to really understand. Okay. So we can go to the next slide. So here are some examples of back pocket questions that I was talking about. And this is where you can take a screenshot if you would like, or if you're taking notes, you can jot down some. But back pocket questions here, these are examples of open, honest questions. So one of my very favorite ones to ask is the first one. What's that like for you? So this is one where I don't know if you've ever been asked this, but it really is, it's like, wow, that is really freeing and empowering. for me to be able to, in this conflict type situation, to be able to express what it's like for me. Or, these questions can go for in the workplace, in significant relationships with other people, with your family members, it can go with your students as well if you teach. So just to set that stage. So you might also say, one of my other favorite ones is the fourth one down. What are you willing or not willing to do? That really opens up someone's mind and expands their opportunities for answers. And even within themselves, it might help them see that there are a lot of other things that they can do in this situation. There are a lot of things that they are willing to do and are not willing to do. It helps them get clear on what they want to do. Like maybe it might even start bringing up some boundaries for them or whatnot. So I'm specifically thinking of, I have a friend who recently started a new business, and she would often come to me and try to get me to like help her work through things. And I asked her this question one time, what are you willing to do or not willing to do? And she sat back and she was like, wow, I've never thought about that. Like she was talking about how she wasn't sure how to get new leads for her business, and she wasn't sure what to do in terms of advertising. And she was watching a lot of other people, a lot of other entrepreneurs do certain things. And she was expressing that sometimes she didn't really want to do that. That didn't align with her business. So I said, well, what are you willing to do or not willing to do? And that really somehow shifted her thought process. She was in conflict within herself. She and I weren't having a conflict, but she was conflicted within herself of what to do next or what even to do at all for her business. So this really set her on a course of thought to be able to think through what she was willing to do and what she wasn't. It really helped her align with her values. And the same can be true for us, whether we're conflicted within ourselves or there might be a conflict with someone else. Another one that I love is at the bottom of the second column. What does and then you insert emotion, teach you? So if you're having a conversation with a coworker or maybe somebody who reports to you or a student or whatever, whoever it is, and they're expressing to you, well, I was really nervous to do XYZ, or I was uncertain about whatever. Or maybe it's a relationship with a significant other and they can say, well, I was really afraid of whatever. Well, then you can say, what does your fear teach you? Or what could your fear be teaching you? Or what could that feeling of wanting to avoid uncertainty be teaching you? And that you don't know what they're going to say, but this really opens up the opportunity for them to think about it and be like, oh, wow, okay, so my fear might be teaching me that whatever. So these are opportunities for you to expand that conversation and to, like I said, set the stage. With asking open, honest questions, you're setting the stage for how your conversation can possibly go. And it's really allowing people to open up and explore, like one of you said in the chat, explore options for what they want to say. So I'd like you in the chat to write down one question from these back pocket questions that you would like to try out this week or next week in a conversation that you might be having with someone, whether it's yourself and you're conflicted within yourself, or there might be a conflict with someone else soon. So go ahead and in the chat, write down one that you would be willing to use. Awesome. Yeah. And one thing I wanted to say too is, what are you hopeful for? Another follow-up question that you can use with that one is the question right below it. What would that do for you? So I saw some of you saying that you would like to ask, what are you hopeful for? So you might want to have that, what would that do for you, also in your back pocket. Yeah, I love the one too, what would this look like if nothing changes? Because that really, that really helps them be like, oh, okay, well, if nothing changes in this situation, then that kind of can be followed up with what are you willing to do or not willing to do? So if nothing changes in a situation, it might help someone say, okay, well, if nothing changes in this situation, then I could be okay with that. You know, it's not my favorite thing, but I could be okay with that. Or if nothing changes with this situation, then that could be a real problem for me. Like I could be in a really toxic situation and that could be a problem for me. So then I would need to ask myself, or you could ask the person, what are you willing to do or not willing to do to change the situation yourself? So that is excellent. Thank you for putting your questions in here. And I invite you to do that, to use these questions. And it also helps you feel empowered when you have these back pocket questions, so that you're going into a situation and you don't feel stumped or you don't feel like you're going to trip over your words. I will say too that this takes practice, and that it can just become part of your normal way of approaching conflict. If you have these back pocket questions, it can really be helpful for you as you're going into it, where it might help lessen the stress that you were mentioning earlier. And then when I talked about the conflict metaphor, it might help reduce some of those feelings of, this is an ominous type of a situation that I'm walking into, and it can start to help you on the path of connecting. Okay, we can go to the next slide. Okay, so we've talked about the first step, which is ask. The second step is to listen. So listening is a skill set that allows us to comprehend, analyze something, discern it, appreciate it, and support it. So listening can really help diffuse some of those defensive situations and really, keep us on the path of connecting with the people that we are surrounding ourselves with. So listening is different than hearing. And I bet you have heard that before. So in the chat, will you describe what the difference for you is between listening and hearing? Yeah, so is being present for listening or for hearing? I'm going to say listening. I bet that's what you meant, Lola Jean. Yeah. Yeah, so listening is being present, and hearing is maybe more with the intent to respond. Listening is paying attention. It's active. Hearing is passive. Listening means you're active in the conversation. It's paying attention with the intent to interact. I love that description too. These are wonderful. Hearing is one of our five senses. Listening is presence. Yeah, we're not interrupting. Yeah, really listening is not thinking about how we're going to respond. It's being quiet, using both ears to understand what the person is coming from and how they feel. Excellent. Yeah, you can keep sharing. Yeah, okay, so you stop thinking about what you're going to say to really pay attention to the other's thoughts. Excellent, that is listening. So listening is where I like to tell my students, so I teach interpersonal communication at Utah State, and I like to describe listening with my students as listening with your whole body. So what I describe that as is listening with your whole body is utilizing all of your senses as well. And hearing is one of those. So you can hear the words that they're saying. If you're listening, your mind is involved. Like people were saying, you're present. You're not thinking, you're just about how you're going to respond. You're thinking about what they're actually saying, and you're trying to understand. You can also listen with your eyes. So we talk about nonverbal communication cues in my class, and listening with our eyes, so to speak, is paying attention to the whole situation, paying attention to the environment that you're in, the body language of the person that is talking, Are they fidgeting? Are they completely still? Are their arms blocked? Are they fiddling with their hair? Are they looking up? Looking up and off often indicates that they're thinking through their answer, not necessarily that they are disconnected from the conversation. Listening with our whole body, like this discern part, it really helps us listen with our instinct or that gut feeling. You might hear someone saying words, and you, with listening also includes hearing the tone of their voice and if their voice might be quivering or anything like that. So you're listening to, excuse me, other things besides the words. And with that, you might be able to discern, could there be something they don't feel comfortable saying yet? They're saying words, but maybe there's more to the story that they might not feel comfortable saying, or they might not have words to express it. So this might be where some of your questions that are open and honest can help them feel safe, feel comfortable to express those things. And that's where your back pocket questions can come in, when they're asked with a sincere tone and a sincere intent to listen, to understand. So listening then also then helps us analyze, like I was saying earlier too. It can help you know what back pocket question to ask next. It can also, back pocket questions are a good guide to help you feel comfortable going into a conflict type situation, until you're comfortable coming up with your own open, honest questions. You don't just have to use the back pocket questions, but as you're listening to what the people are saying and you're listening with your whole body, then you can ask very specific questions for what they're saying. And that will vary depending on what the conversation is, but you can still ask open, honest questions that aren't necessarily on that list. And that's from discerning and analyzing what they're saying, then, and seeking to understand what they're saying through deep listening. Then you can ask those questions that are pertinent and will show that you're supporting them. You can have support even when you're in conflict, and that's going to help us resolve the conflict and create that connection. So listening, let's go over some things that listening is not, and that's on our next slide. So we've talked about what listening is and what listening with our whole body is. So listening is not pseudo listening, which is our first one. Pseudo listening is where, okay, so you've been taught, when you're talking with someone, you may have been taught to face them, to make eye contact. You may have been taught some of those things. So you might just go right into that where you're like, okay, I'm making eye contact. I've turned my body toward them, but your mind is off somewhere else. Like we talked about listening some earlier, you guys said that listening is being present. Pseudo listening is not being present. It looks like we're listening, but we really aren't. Our mind is somewhere else, whether that somewhere else is thinking about what we've got to do the rest of the day, thinking about our own feelings about this problem, like I'm so annoyed that they're even saying this, or thinking about how we're going to respond or how we're going to reply, rather than listening to what they're actually saying and listening with our whole body. Okay, listening is not listening to respond or to reply, like I was saying. So you're being fully present and you're not thinking about the very next thing that you're going to say. And that can feel really frustrating. So put a Y in the chat if you've experienced this before, for like, yes, Y for yes, where someone is just getting ready to say their next thing. They're not really actually listening to you. And that can feel really frustrating. That makes me personally feel like what I'm saying doesn't matter, and that perhaps I don't matter. So that can feel really frustrating. Okay, I'm seeing a ton of Ys. Excellent. And not excellent that you felt that, but you can relate to what we're saying. Okay, let's go to the next bullet. So listening is not defensive listening or confirmation bias. So confirmation bias is where we're just listening for things that will confirm what we believe and what we want to hear. So, and it's also not defensively listening. So defensively listening kind of goes back to listening to respond, where we are you know, well, it's just, it says it in the thing, defensive listening, where we are feeling like, okay, I've got to stand up for myself. I've got to do it in this way. And I'm going to put my foot down and be like, no, that's not what I was doing. Instead of listening to like really understand what they were saying, to hear what they were saying, and listening with your whole body. Listening with your whole body and being present and actually listening to understand can help reduce some of that defensiveness that we might be feeling. Put a 1 in the chat if you have been talking with someone and they are really like missing the mark on what you're saying. They're just responding with things that they already agree with that you're saying, and they might be missing what you're actually saying. That can feel frustrating as well, where you're like, well, yeah, of course you agree with that. I know that you already believe that, but this is what I'm actually saying too. And I would love to work through this. That can be frustrating. Okay, let's go to the next slide, or sorry, the next bullet. So listening is not advice giving. We talked about that a little bit at the beginning, where questions, open, honest questions, are not advice in the form of a question. For example, we don't want to say, well, have you considered going to therapy? Or have you considered talking to this person about it? Or have you considered whatever? So that would be like, my advice is, oh, I really think they should go talk to that person. And so then I'm going to ask them that question but it's really my advice in the form of a question. So it's not advice giving. So put a 2 in the chat if you've ever been talking with someone and they're just like full of advice and you just needed someone to listen. You just needed someone to hear you, to see you. You didn't need advice. You just needed someone to like help you work through what you wanted to do, what you were willing to do and not willing to do. Help you try to figure out and make sense of the situation. Yeah, so lots of 2s. So will you put in the chat, what does it feel like when you're listening, when you're talking to someone and they're just sharing that advice? What does it feel like for you? That you're not important. It can feel discouraging that they didn't hear anything that you said. You felt small, somewhat demeaning.
Yeah.
It can break the trust. They're not hearing you. Yeah. Go ahead and keep sharing if you'd like. Oh yeah, it can be really frustrating, more frustrating than when you started to open up. Yeah, it helps. It doesn't help. It makes you feel like, it makes me feel like I want to close up again because they're not really hearing what I'm saying. Yeah, do I even matter to you? Okay, so we want to avoid that, and asking those open, honest questions will really help us. And listening with our whole body will also really help us to where we're listening to them and we're present with them and we're seeing what they're going through, and we're not trying to make our agenda be theirs by giving advice. Okay, let's do the last bullet. Listening is not a silver lining. Okay, I am the queen of silver lining things. And I have learned, I have a friend who several years ago was going through some really terrible times, and I was trying to help her see, like, I was trying to lift her spirits and help her see some positive things in her situation. And that did not go well. Like, she was very kind and she said, Lindsay, you're always doing this silver lining thing, and it makes me feel like my emotions right now don't matter. My feelings right now don't matter. What I'm experiencing right now doesn't matter. It feels like you're trying to take me out of it, and it's too fast for me. Like, I still need to work through it. And so she said, I appreciate that about you. And when I'm ready, I will ask for those silver linings, but I don't want them yet. So sometimes listening when someone's going through something really, really heartbreaking or really sad can make us as the listener feel uncomfortable. So a lot of times we want to get out of that feeling of being uncomfortable. And so we try to look for the positive and silver lining it. And we try to get them out of what they're feeling because we are uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. And that's not what we want to do here when we're listening to understand and we're creating this space of connection. We want to be there in it with them. And so that also takes some practice. If we are feeling uncomfortable with maybe what they're going through, then we need to, outside of this conversation, we need to look at ourselves and be like, okay, why was I feeling uncomfortable? How can I work through that next time so that I can fully be present for that person? And one thing that I do and that Claire taught me to do is to put our feelings, because they do matter, on a shelf for a second if they're not directly related to the conflict that we are resolving. Like if something that the other person is saying is bringing up stuff for me personally, then I'll put it on a shelf and I'll come back to it. And my feelings know that I'm going to come back to it. And so they're not going to feel like I'm putting them under the rug or I'm avoiding it, but I'm putting it aside for a minute because I'm focusing on the conversation at hand. So my feelings are important. If they don't relate to that conversation right then I'm going to put them aside for a second so that I can remain fully present. Okay. So step 3 is to express, and that is Diana. She is going to walk us through that. So we've covered asking open, honest questions. We've covered listening and the various things that listening is not, and ways that we can listen with our whole body. And now we're going to express.
Okay, I'm not muted anymore. Hello, everyone, again. And Lindsay, thank you so much for sharing such great wisdom on listening and asking questions. I hope that was helpful for all of you. In the chat, I would like you to answer this question. What do you think a response is? How is the response different than a reaction? So we talked about listening to understand rather than response. That's the first step. Like, we want to fully listen and be present and fully understand what they're saying. But at some point, after we've done that and after we've understood what they said, we still need to respond to them. So, but what is the difference between a response and a reaction? What do you all think? Reacting is quick and without thought. Yeah. Acting without thinking it through. Defensive. Reaction is emotion filled. Response is emotionless. A reaction has to do more with your own feelings and not theirs. Yeah, those are really, really good kind of definitions and concepts related to this thought. And it's definitely what I was on the lines of. So a reaction is often like instantaneous, in the moment. We're saying what we want to say without necessarily taking into consideration what they said or how they will feel about what we said, right? We want to be right. We want to get our thoughts, our needs, our opinions across, and we may not be taking into consideration the other person. A response, we went through the listening stage, we fully understood what they're saying, and now we are taking a way of responding to what they said and their needs, but also going to try to communicate our needs. And there's 3 different ways of doing that. And the first 2 ways that I will talk about are helpful sometimes, but most of the time are not the best solution. And then the last one, assertiveness, which we'll talk about last, is the kind of the best way to get both the other person's needs listened to and met and our own needs listened to and met. So first, we'll talk about passive responses. So in the chat, what do you think what does it mean to have a passive response to someone? What do you think? Does anyone have some ideas on what a passive response looks like? Yeah, not really involved. So maybe some distance there. Yeah, generic answer instead of heartfelt, definitely. Not acknowledging what they just said, that can definitely happen. Yeah, so that's good. A passive response is basically kind of going along with the flow when you have a need that you, or a thought or opinion that you need to have expressed, but you don't want to because maybe conflict makes you feel uncomfortable, or you don't know how to express it. Sometimes we just don't know how to say how we're feeling in a conflict or how we're feeling about a certain things. And so then we'll just say, okay, and go with something, even though that's not what we really want. And sometimes that's okay. Sometimes it's okay to just go with the flow. Sometimes it's okay if someone really wants to go to one restaurant, you know, and you want to go to another one. Sometimes it's okay to be like, okay, we'll just go to the one you want to. Like, this is an okay response sometimes, but when we have a need that's not getting met and we're having a hard time communicating it, this response may not be the best type because it can lead to, you know, unmet needs, resentment if the other person isn't asking us our needs and we're just consistently going with what they need and what they want and our needs aren't getting met. Another type of passive response is just apologizing. So we might say what we need or what we think, and then we might apologize for it. And that can also be passive because that increases the power of your what you need, and you're kind of saying like, this is what I need, but I don't really need it, or I'm wrong for needing it, and that decreases the power, and the other person may not fully take into consideration what you're saying. It can also just be avoiding conflict in general, just avoiding it, staying in what's comfortable. And sometimes we do this because there's less responsibility. So if we don't assert ourselves, if we don't express our needs, if something goes wrong, then we can't be blamed for it, right? Like the person who is being more aggressive might be blamed for it, but we may not be because we just went with the flow. So sometimes there's that complexity to it as well. I just want to say one caveat is like, if you are genuinely afraid of someone, like you're afraid of expressing yourself to them, then this is an okay response. We want to be more assertive, which we'll talk about in a minute, with people we feel safe. But if we don't feel safe expressing our needs to someone, then we don't have to. But we want to sometimes move away from just avoiding the conflict and avoiding our needs in general when we are safe to express them with other people. The next type of response is an aggressive response. Does someone have, or does anyone have any thoughts on what an aggressive response might look like? Blaming, definitely. Yelling, it's someone else's own problem. Loud in your face, sarcasm, yeah. Those are all demeaning. Yeah. The decision is made, you have no choice. So yeah, just like completely not looking at someone else's needs. Tone raises, I'm sorry you feel bad about my behavior. Yes, I hate when people say that. Abrupt body language. Yeah, those are all, I mean, they're not good responses to have, but these are all good ideas related to an aggressive response. And so most of the time we want to avoid having an aggressive response when we're in a conflict because they generally don't make things better. And the things that you described, more of the on one side of the continuum of an aggressive response, the more harsh aggressive responses. Sometimes an aggressive response is just being pushy. And sometimes it is just asserting your own needs to the point to where someone else can't express theirs or feel uncomfortable expressing theirs. And just being pushy, our emotions and our needs are more important than someone else's. And you know, usually this works. Like if you are in a situation with an aggressive person, we usually at some point just go with what they're saying. Or if we are the aggressive person, we usually kind of win the argument, right? Because other people don't like not being listened to, don't like having their needs not taken into consideration. People don't like that. So they just eventually will stop and just go with what you want. So it works, but it's not effective in the sense that people's needs aren't getting met and they're probably going to hold some resentment or be upset or frustrated at you. And those feelings aren't good over time, especially in a work environment. And it makes other people feel unsafe most of the time when we're really pushy, or even if we go to the more extensive blaming, yelling, all those kind of things, like it makes people feel unsafe, and then the conflict and the connection like completely shuts down. The next type of response, which is a kind of the balance we want to strike, is being assertive. And assertive basically means that we are listening to the needs of others and we are validating them, but we are also expressing our own needs and we're going to try to figure it out together, kind of thing. Does anyone have an example of what an assertive response might look like? Or maybe body language or something someone might say if they're being assertive? No, that's okay if this might be a new concept to some people. And this is a really key one because it really helps build this connection. So like I said, how can we work this out together? That's a great question. Yeah, so now they're coming. Explaining how you feel and asking for what you need. Yeah, exactly. So definitely explaining how you feel about something and asking what the other person needs. Totally, that works really well. Or saying that doesn't work for me. Yeah, you can say, X thing that's happening doesn't work for me. What else can we do about it? Like, that's a totally good thing to say because you're expressing that it's not working. And then you're saying, let's figure something else out. And repeating what I heard them say and respond with a point of view. Yes, that's good. So validating what they're saying and then saying like, this is what I think about it. I understand the problem is X thing. So how can we adjust this to work for everyone? Yes, these are all great. So you kind of get the gist of it that we're trying to meet the needs of the other person and our own needs, and we're trying to validate both. And you, in an assertive response, you stand up for your own needs and your own feelings or opinions, but you also allow the other person to share theirs, and you also validate theirs, and you don't demean theirs or diminish theirs. You try to work things out together, and where both people's needs are equally important. And you do not violate their rights or their space. So we're not being pushy, we're not making them feel uncomfortable, right? We're having this safe, open space. And this one definitely works best with both asking and listening, like we've talked about earlier. If we're being assertive, it's a lot easier to go through those asking and listening stages. If we're being passive or aggressive, sometimes it's a little harder to really ask and really listen because we're not treating our needs and their needs at kind of an equal level. So this one works the best with asking questions and listening that we've been talking about. And so we can start this by asking the other person, like going through the first few steps of asking and listening and then responding. Sometimes we might say our needs first, and then we go through the steps of asking and listening to the other person's needs. And so that is an assertive response, basically trying to get our needs and the other person's needs met and working together to have that happen and expressing our own feelings while not diminishing the feelings of others. And so I have a little scenario for you to answer really fast if we have time. What time is it? Yeah, we got a minute. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen. You can put your answer in the chat. But let's say you come home from work one day tired, maybe that happens for some of you. And as soon as you get home, your partner tells you about how hard their day was, and you just want to be alone for a few minutes when you get home, and then you'll be able to talk to them. How would you express that in an assertive way where you're trying to meet both their needs and your needs? How would you respond to that? I would like to listen, but I need a minute to unwind, and then I can give you full attention. I've got to take a minute. Can we come back? Oh, wow, there's so many coming. Sorry you had a bad day. Just give me a minute and then we can discuss it. Yeah. Can I have 5 minutes and then we can talk? Yeah, you got the idea, right? So you're validating their needs and then you're expressing your needs, right? Like, I need some space right now. I really want to listen to you. I know this is important to you, but I don't have the capacity to listen right now. Can you give me a few minutes and then we'll come back and I'll be able to be fully present with you. Yeah, so you got that. That is really great responses there. And so that's what assertiveness is, right? We could have an aggressive response and say, oh my gosh, can you just leave me alone? Or like, wow, you just have so many feelings all the time, or whatever. We could be really aggressive and rude or sarcastic or put them down, right? We don't want to be aggressive, and we could be really passive and then not get our needs met and just listen to them and then not really have any meaningful connection or conversation because we're just putting our needs aside and then just listening to them, and that can be difficult when we don't have the capacity for that. So we want to be able to express both our needs and validate their needs and come together to get both needs met in a somehow. Does anyone have any questions for us? We covered whether it's about asking open, honest questions, listening, and what listening is, or types of responses and being assertive. Does anyone have questions or thoughts they want to share, or personal examples? You can put them in the chat, or you could unmute and ask a question.
I have one, Diana, and I don't
Yeah.
know how much you can, or Lindsay, help with this, but what if you typically have been a person in a certain scenario where you are the passive person? How do you teach yourself, I guess, to be a more assertive and I guess not off-put that person because they're used to dealing with you as a passive person? What would you recommend in that situation?
I can share, or Lindsay, do you want to share?
Yeah, I can share, and then you can add to it if you'd like to.
Okay, sounds good.
So one thing that I have to do personally is do some internal work for this one, moving from passive to assertive. So that might include figuring out what my values are, figuring out what my needs are, asking myself some of those back pocket questions that I shared with you earlier, and also doing positive self statements or affirmations. So, like, my needs do matter. I am important. My thoughts are important. Other people want to hear my thoughts, things like that. So that you can really start to train your brain that you do matter and that you are important and your thoughts and needs do matter. And so then feeling empowered then can help us move from passive to assertive as well. And so having the tools can help us feel empowered. So asking, listening, and expressing is a tool that you can add to your toolkit. Having those back pocket questions is a tool that you can have. And then doing those affirmations and really doing that internal work, is they're all different tools that can help you go from maybe whatever reason you're feeling like you need to be passive. You can really start to uncover what those things might be as well. And then you can start to address those to be more assertive. So this one is a lot of internal work, I would say, and buoying up your toolkit. What would you add, Diana?
I would add, I still am sometimes, more passive in conflict. I don't like to express my feelings. I would rather just go with the flow, and I had to learn to be more assertive, and I'm still learning sometimes. Like, we're not always perfect at these communication processes, right? It's a process of growth. So I'd also add that, like, if you're trying to be more assertive, give yourself room to grow and don't expect yourself to get it perfect the first time you try to be assertive. Like, that probably won't happen, and instead just reflect on how you could grow, how you could do better next time. Think through, like, how could I approach this differently? Or just notice in conflict or moments where you're having a hard time, what about this is making it hard for me to express my needs? So that's kind of what I had to do. I had to start thinking about conflict and, like, what's happening in these conflicts that I'm having that's making it hard for me to express my needs? And then how can I learn to express my needs? And what I started doing is, with people that I didn't have a ton of conflict with, that I tended to just, they were more chill people in general, I started being more assertive with them because it's a little safer. And then people who are a little more, obstinate, maybe, I tried being assertive with them at a later point once I kind of got the practice. So start with people who might be a little bit easier to practice these skills on, and then go to those who might be a little more difficult in your life, is probably what I would say. So someone asked, what is the best way to take a break from a conflict when the other person is being forceful or even hurtful with words without completely breaking the relationship? That's a really good question. I think to an extent it depends on the person, and your own needs and thoughts, and exactly what's happening in the situation. Definitely what I would say. Sometimes you can I've told people, like, hey, I need 24 hours to think about this, and then I'll come and talk to you about it. Like, it could be something like that. And yeah, I can continue to think about that for a minute. But Lindsay, do you have other thoughts?
I do, yeah. So this is a really, both of these questions so far have been, well, and all of them will be really important to understand and work through. And this one can be so hard because, like you said, like you don't want to break the relationship. And so when someone else is being forceful and you can start to feel yourself, maybe feel anxious or uneasy about responding, or like you just want to go back into your snail shell, like someone said as their metaphor. One thing that I would say is, you know, you are really important to me, and this relationship is really important to me, and it's important to me that I have some time to think through this and to you know, to separate myself from this for just a second, but know that when I'm separating myself, I'm not separating myself from our relationship. Like I said, you matter to me and this relationship matters, and I need some time. So what I think helping them see that they really, or you can't make them understand that the relationship is important to you. You can express that the relationship is important to you. And as such, you would like some time, like Diana said, to think about it. And that can also help diffuse maybe their forcefulness. So one thing that I have my students do too is I have a rule in my class that they, like the students, when they get a grade back, they need to wait 24 hours before they reach out to me, because a lot of times, like, their relationship with me is important and my relationship with them, I hope, is important to them, but it matters to me how I respond to my students and how I create that space for them. And sometimes when they get a grade back, they can start to feel all the feels, like they're not good enough or whatever, they didn't measure up. And that's not the case at all. So I have them wait 24 hours to maybe diffuse some of those initial responses that they might be feeling. And then we can talk about it. I want to hear what they have to say because it matters to me. And like you were saying, you know, that relationship matters. So taking some time, it's okay. It's okay to, like, you know, Diana was saying in the assertive language, to say what you need and to expect that, to set those boundaries too, which is a whole other discussion about creating boundaries that are for a healthy relationship. But yeah.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I don't want to monopolize, but I feel like in this virtual world that we've been in, and a lot of the communication is through now mostly emails, slacking each other, Zoom, things can be misinterpreted. What are your recommendations as we kind of move to this more virtual communication style?
That's a really good question. Man, I've had those experiences when, you know, someone sends an email or something and you're like, what? Like, oh, that's so rude. And then later you think about it, oh, well, they might have mean it differently. So I think one skill we talk about in the interpersonal class that I teach one too, as well as Lindsay, is providing multiple attribution. So we might have a response, right? We might have an initial reaction, and then we might, you know, notice that that's okay. It's okay to have that initial reaction, but then think, what are some other meanings or interpretations I could give to what this person said? So what are some other things I could have meant by this? What are some things that could have caused them to say this? How else could I interpret this? Asking those questions and providing more than one reason why someone said something, or reason you could, or way you could interpret it. Having more than one option tends to diffuse it, and then can really help us in our communication across with other people. So we're not just responding to that. We think they said something really rude, and then, oh, they totally didn't mean it that way. And then that causes conflict. We could kind of diffuse that before that even happens sometimes. Lindsay, do you have something to add to that?
Yeah, really quickly, because I know we're running out of time, but or we might be out of time. But my thing that I do in my class as well, and that I take upon myself, is to I approach people with wonder and grace. And so it's like Diana was saying. So I wonder, I wonder what they meant here. I wonder if the way that I'm reacting to it is accurate. I wonder. Like, I wonder what frame of mind they were in when they wrote this email, or when we had this Zoom call and it felt like it was a little bit more disconnected than if we were in person or something. So I wonder, and that's like what Diana said, is that it opens up more interpretations of what could possibly be going on. And that really is freeing for you as well, because then you're not reacting. You're like, oh, okay, well, I wonder, maybe it is something else. Maybe they weren't saying it in this tone that I read it in. I wonder also why I'm thinking they wrote it in this certain tone, if it's an email or whatever. So yeah, like Katie said, that she calls this charitable interpretation. That's a great way to describe it too. So I think it's a lot of, like Diana was saying, self-check to see what frame of mind am I in right now, and to read it this way or to react this way, and what else could they be meaning from it.
Okay, well, I think we've run out of time. Thank you, both Lindsay and Diana. I think this has been very excellent presentation, and so we really appreciate your time and wish you the best. So thanks everyone for attending, and have a good rest of your day.
Thanks for having us.
Mhm.